Hello, U.S. History students, and welcome to Unit 5, Lesson 4, FDR and the Second New Deal, 1935 to 38. In 1935, FDR begins an aggressive series of laws that he calls the Second New Deal. So the first New Deal is 1933 to 35. The second New Deal is really implemented mostly 36 to 38 or 36 to 40, depending upon who you're looking at. The second New Deal is passed by Congress in a rapid succession, meaning that they pass these different acts and different laws very, very quickly. And they begin to nickname this the second 100 days. Because as we talked about in Lesson 3, the presidents are usually judged on what they do in the first 100 days. Well, in the first 100 days, FDR passes a huge number of legislation very, very quickly. So because he does this again in the second New Deal, they nickname it the second 100 days. The most ambitious program of the Second New Deal is the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration. The reason that they implement this is because by 1935, most New Deal work programs were non-skilled building jobs. The CCC, the PWA. These are jobs where anybody can go do them, didn't matter. CCC, you had to be a man, ages 18 to 25. PWA, you could just go. But they're building jobs. They're building roads, schools, airports. The WPA was created to provide as many as 10 million jobs for men, women, kids in these building projects. But not only in the building projects, in skilled professions. So artists, writers, teachers, doctors, photographers are all able to get jobs through the WPA. And one of the most pivotal products of the WPA would be Dorothea Lange's photography. He paid her, or not he, but the government paid Dorothea Lange, this photographer, to go around and take pictures of what life was like during the Depression, to document that so that people in future generations could see what life was really like. In order to combat poverty amongst many elderly and disabled citizens in the country, Congress creates the Social Security Act. And this is another one of those programs we still have around today. And it provides old age pensions, or basically paychecks for retired people after the age of 65. It was also the first welfare program because it provides also disability payments. So money for people who are blind or handicapped, as well as needy children. For example, if you are a child under the age of 18 and one of your parents dies, then you get Social Security money until you turn 18. So your father, for example, was a citizen working for the, whatever industry, and he passes away. He dies. Then you would get a Social Security check until you turn 18. And the purpose of this was to allow for these people to not live in poverty anymore. For them to have at least a little bit of an income, and for allowing that income to then stimulate the economy, because now those people have the money to purchase other items. One of the most important reforms on the New Deal was the Wagner Act. This is a law that protects workers' rights to strike and collectively bargain. So essentially allowing for workers to protest to get better wages, better working hours, whatever they may need. The Wagner Act creates the Fair Labor Practices Commission as a means of regulating unfair practices that were used by companies to discourage union membership. Because some industries did not want people joining unions, because unions, again, are organizations that fight for the rights of workers within that industry. And the less people that join the union, the less protection those people have from the unions. And so the Fair Labor Practices Commission was overseeing prevention of people being almost bullied in some cases to not join the union, so that those industries didn't have to listen to what the union said. Because of the Wagner Act, union membership increases greatly in the United States, as we can see in our chart right here. By 1950, we've got about just under 16 million people that are members of unions, where in 1900 we had around 1 million. Now, granted, the number of people in the United States has also increased greatly over that 50 years, but that's not to say that union membership did not drastically increase. In 1936, FDR is overwhelmingly elected to a second term. He gets 98.5% of the Electoral College vote. But his second term is going to be a little bit harder than his first term. By 1937, Roosevelt had faced many criticisms, not just from Huey Long that we heard about in Lesson 3, but many people are starting to criticize that the New Deal's too expensive. You're paying all this money out for all these different programs, but we're still in the Depression. Like, your programs are not eliminating unemployment. We're not ending the Depression. Yeah, it's helped, but do we really need to continue to pay that money for it? So because of these criticisms and the level that these people are showing their distaste for spending all the money, FDR does back off on government-funded job programs, and unemployment begins to go back up. So because he starts going back on the CCC or the WPA or the PWA, those people now don't have jobs again. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that a lot of people think it's too expensive, yet if we don't fund the programs, then unemployment goes back up. And a lot of people also begin to say that the New Deal is not stimulating the economy. Well, if you were in a situation where you've just gotten a job after not having a job for, let's say, several months, you're going to try to save as much money as possible. And the Great Depression era people become a very frugal people. People that spend most of their money instead of using it to purchase items that would be considered luxury items. So they're saving that disposable income instead of adding it back into the economy, because they don't know whether they're going to be able to have that money for very long. Jobs are unreliable at this point. So they don't know how long that job is going to be available. So they save that money instead of putting it back into the economy. In addition, 2 New Deal recovery programs, the AAA and NRA, were declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Remember, the Supreme Court is the branch of the government that determines whether laws, acts, things like that, either are okay under the Constitution, like the Constitution says you can do it, or are unconstitutional, which means that the Constitution says it's not okay. And those 2 programs, the Supreme Court says no. They're like, I'm sorry, Mr. President, you can't do this. And this scares FDR. because he feels as though the Supreme Court is going to start weakening the New Deal. How many other programs are they going to try to say are unconstitutional? And so in order to get this to stop, he threatens to do what's called court packing. He's going to pack the Supreme Court, and he's going to increase the number of justices from 9 to 15. And the president is the person who can recommend people become Supreme Court justices. They have to go through a lengthy process. They have to be vetted. They have to be, basically they have to know that they're okay by Congress before they can become justices. But he's saying, look, there's 9 Supreme Court justices now. I'm going to increase that number to 15. And the whole point of that was to provide additional justices that would vote the way FDR wanted them to vote, as a means of not getting his programs deemed unconstitutional. This made people angry. People were furious. And they really felt as though FDR was overstepping his executive power, going against the other branches of the government. And in a time when Adolf Hitler is starting to take over Europe and dictators are a huge problem overseas, a lot of Americans really start to become afraid. And as we can see in this political cartoon, it shows government reorganization, Supreme Court revision, dictator. And it's showing like the steps that FDR is taking might lead him to become a dictator. And that's what many Americans are afraid of after hearing what's happening in Europe with Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin. And just to clarify, a dictator is when one person rules an entire country absolutely. Meaning that one person controls everything. There's nobody there that's going to check his actions and keep him where he needs to be. And Americans are afraid because FDR is saying, all right, well, I'm just going to increase the Supreme Court and I'm going to do all this stuff. They're scared that it's going to lead to a dictatorship. After 1938, Congress begins to focus on trying to control spending. This means they are not passing any more New Deal laws because they feel as though it's not actually doing what it says it's going to do, and it's too expensive. After 1938, relief, recovery, and reform are still there. Those programs, a lot of those programs did not go away. But the way that we look at relief, recovery, and reform changes slightly from what we saw before. So for relief, we've got job programs to lower unemployment. Recovery is programs to stimulate the economy and end the depression. We saw that already. And then, of course, we see the reform doesn't change. We're still trying to correct those problems and prevent future depressions. Overall, FDR's New Deal dramatically changes the nation. New Deal was successful in many cases. Relief programs like the CCC, the PWA, and the WPA help people through the Depression. Those are those job-creating acts that are allowing for people to get jobs when they couldn't have them before. And the New Deal is very successful in reform. We reform the stock market. We reform banking. We reform labor unions. And we offer programs that are going to help the elderly and people to be able to have money in their pocket and to be able to get by. But the New Deal did not lead to recovery of the American economy. The New Deal programs, while they do greatly help, they do not end the Depression, which is what a lot of people were hoping. So by 1938, nearly 10 million people were unemployed. So unemployment has gone down, but wealth remained very unevenly divided. The really, really wealthy people, your Morgans, your Rockefellers, your Vanderbilts, are still very, very wealthy. And that's where the theory of Huey Long's ideas and his plan really do sound good, but in practice it probably wouldn't have worked out the way he wanted. FDR's charisma and his active involvement really changed the role of the presidency. No more do we have the laissez-faire, lazy government idea where the president's very hands-off and the people need to do it on their own. Now the people are expecting the government to help them, and they're expecting the president to care and want to help. And his leadership really unifies African Americans, unions, immigrants, poor voters, and brings them into the Democratic Party. And this is what really helps to get him elected for his third and even his fourth term. Because at this point, we do not have presidential term limits. That's not a constitutional amendment yet. So the president can really run for as many terms as he wants. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt is elected to an unprecedented 4 terms. Unfortunately, he is not able to finish his 4th term. He passes away in 1945. And it's after his presidency that we implement that amendment. The 22nd Amendment says that a president cannot serve for more than 2 terms or a total of 10 years. And each presidential term is 4 years. So you could serve out the last 2 years of the president before you's term and then run for 2 consecutive terms on your own. For the first time, the government has used deficit spending, or spending money in a time when you don't really have the money to spend, and create welfare groups to help the people in need. And this sets a precedent for the future, because now we have several welfare programs in our nation that help people get back on their feet or have food or things like that. So the New Deal really helps build up hope in the American people. So the causes of the Great Depression are stock-based economy, unequal distribution of income, problems in industry and farming, increasing consumer debt, buying on margin, buying on credit, and then the spark is obviously the stock market crash. The effects of those causes are people are out of work. We have the rise of shanty towns because people are not able to pay their mortgages. Banks fail, schools close. This leads to a worldwide crash in the economy, not just an American-centric event. And then FDR comes in with a New Deal and it provides hope. Yes, it has its problems, but many of the programs we still use in 2019 and will continue to use probably for many years in the future, it does prevent more people from being out of jobs because it does offer those job programs and it offers hope. And FDR is seen as a very good leader. If he hadn't been, he wouldn't have been elected to 4 terms. But unfortunately, it takes a Second World War to get us out of the Great Depression. And this economic downturn lasts for around 15 years. That brings us to the end of Unit 5, Lesson 4, FDR and the Second New Deal. See you back here for Unit 6, Lesson 1. Have a great day.